There is an animal swimming beneath the Arctic ice right now that was already old when your great-great-grandmother was born, not metaphorically old, scientifically measurably shockingly old. We are talking about a creature that may have been alive before the American Revolution, before Shakespeare wrote his first play, before Columbus ever set foot in the New World, and it is still out there, moving slowly through the dark water. Welcome to Wild World Explorer, where we go deeper than the surface to find the stories that genuinely change how you see the natural world. Today, we are talking about one of the most extraordinary animals ever discovered on this planet, the Greenland shark. The animal living in the wrong century. Picture this. You are deep underwater somewhere between Greenland and Iceland. The water is so cold your bones would ache in seconds. There is almost no light. The pressure is immense. And moving through that darkness is a massive gray shape, slow and silent. Like a shadow that has been drifting since before modern history began. This is the Greenland shark. And its official scientific name is Somniosus microcephalus. Break that down and it gets interesting immediately. Somniosus comes from the Latin word for sleep or drowsiness. Microcephalus means small head. So scientists essentially named this ancient giant the sleepy small-headed one, for a creature this remarkable. That name feels almost like a joke, but as you will soon find out, that slowness, that stillness is not weakness. It is survival at its most extreme. The Greenland shark is not trying to impress anyone. It does not leap out of the water. It does not chase boats. It simply exists, moving at roughly 1 kilometer per hour through freezing depths, breathing water that would kill most other animals within minutes. And yet here it is, outliving everything around it by centuries. Scientists confirmed in 2016, using radiocarbon dating of the shark's eye lens, that the oldest individual they examined was approximately 392 years old, with a possible range stretching to 512 years. Think about that number for a moment, 500 years. That shark was born around the same time explorers were first mapping the coastlines of the Americas. That is not just old for a fish, that is old for almost anything alive on Earth today, and by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how and why this animal bends the rules of life itself. So we know its name. We know its age, but where exactly does this creature fit in the grand story of life on Earth? That question is more interesting than you might expect. The Greenland shark belongs to the order Squaliformes. That is the group scientists call the dogfish sharks. Now, when most people hear the word shark, they picture something fast and terrifying. White sharks, tiger sharks, hammerheads, animals built for speed and aggression. The Greenland shark is not that. Not even close. It belongs to a quieter, older branch of the shark family tree, one that never needed to be flashy to survive. Within that order, it sits in the family Somniosidae. These are the sleeper sharks, and the name fits perfectly. Sleeper sharks are slow, deep water predators. They are not built to chase, they are built to endure. There are about 10 species in this family, and the Greenland shark is by far the largest of them all. Now here is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Sharks as a group have been around for roughly 450 million years. That means sharks were already swimming in Earth's oceans before dinosaurs even existed, before the first trees grew on land, before almost everything we consider ancient, and within that already ancient group. The lineage that produced the Greenland shark is considered particularly primitive, particularly unchanged. Scientists sometimes describe these sharks as living fossils, not because they are extinct, but because their basic body plan has barely changed over an enormous stretch of geological time. Think of it this way. Most animals are in a race, evolving faster, growing smarter, adapting to new environments. The Greenland shark looked at that race millions of years ago and simply decided not to join. Its strategy was different. Go slow, go deep, stay cold. And it worked so well that the species barely needed to change at all. That is an extraordinary kind of success. Most animal species that ever existed are now gone, extinct. The Greenland shark is still here, still doing essentially what its ancestors did in the same cold darkness, at the same unhurried pace. But surviving in those waters requires more than just ancient genes. It requires a very specific address. And the address this shark has chosen is one of the most extreme places on the planet. That extreme address is the North Atlantic and Arctic Ocean. And when we say extreme, we mean it in every sense of the word. The Greenland shark is found across a vast range, from the waters surrounding Greenland and Iceland, stretching east toward Norway and the Barents Sea, and west toward the Canadian Arctic and the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Some have even been found as far south as the Gulf of Mexico. Though those sightings are rare and usually involve individuals diving to much greater depths to find water cold enough for them to survive. Because cold water is everything to this shark, it is not just a preference, it is a biological requirement. The Greenland shark thrives in water temperatures ranging from -1 degree Celsius to about 10 degrees Celsius. For context, 10 degrees Celsius is the kind of cold that makes most people pull their hand out of the water immediately. For this shark, that is practically a warm summer afternoon. In summer months, the shark dives deep, sometimes down to 800 meters below the surface, where sunlight has never reached and the pressure is crushing. Down there, the water stays cold year-round. In winter, when Arctic surface waters cool dramatically, the shark can come much shallower, sometimes to depths of just a few hundred meters, occasionally even closer to the surface near ice edges. This vertical movement is important. It tells us the shark is not just passively drifting, it is actively managing its environment. Choosing depths the way we choose which room in the house feels most comfortable, always following the cold. Always seeking that specific temperature range that lets its ancient body function. What is remarkable is how little light this animal ever sees for much of its life. It exists in what scientists call the mesopelagic and bathypelagic zones. These are the twilight and midnight zones of the ocean. Vast, dark, cold regions that humans have barely explored. Most of what lives down there is still unknown to science. And the Greenland shark moves through all of it quietly. No rush, no urgency, just that slow, steady drift through the dark. You might wonder, what does a body built for that kind of world actually look like? Because surviving down there requires some very specific and very unusual physical features. So what does this animal actually look like up close, if you were somehow able to see one drifting toward you in that dark water? Here is what you would see. First, the size. The Greenland shark is enormous. Adults typically reach between 4 and 5 meters in length. Some reported individuals have been measured at over 6 meters. That puts it in the same size range as a great white shark. But where a great white looks sharp and aggressive, built like a missile, the Greenland shark looks rounded. Heavy, almost slow in its shape, its body is thick and cylindrical. Its fins are small relative to its body size. It looks less like a predator and more like a boulder that somehow learned to swim. The color is a dull gray. Brown, sometimes with faint spots or streaks along the sides. Nothing flashy, nothing designed to impress. Just a color that disappears perfectly into the cold, dim water around it. Now the eyes. This is where things get strange. The Greenland shark has small eyes, which makes sense for an animal living in near total darkness. But what makes it remarkable is what lives on those eyes. Almost every Greenland shark observed by scientists has a parasitic creature attached directly to its cornea. It is a tiny crustacean called Omatacota elongata. This parasite burrows into the surface of the eye and feeds there, causing significant damage to the shark's vision. Scientists believe most Greenland sharks are functionally blind as a result. That sounds like a disaster, but here is the twist. In the deep dark ocean where this shark lives, vision was never the most important sense to begin with. The shark relies primarily on its lateral line, a system of sensory organs running along its body that detects tiny vibrations and pressure changes in the water. It also has an extraordinary sense of smell. It can detect chemical signals from enormous distances. So losing its eyesight barely slows it down, and then there is the flesh. The meat of the Greenland shark is packed with a compound called trimethylamine oxide. This compound keeps the shark cells from being crushed by the immense pressure of deep water, but for any animal that eats the shark raw, that same compound acts like a powerful neurotoxin. It causes dizziness, disorientation, and in large enough doses. Death. The Greenland shark is essentially wearing its own chemical armor, and nobody taught it to do that. It simply evolved that way over millions of years of quiet, cold survival. An animal this old, living in a world this dark and this quiet. Makes you wonder, does it ever encounter others of its kind? And if it does, what happens? The honest answer is that we barely know. The Greenland shark is fundamentally a solitary animal. It does not school. It does not hunt in coordinated groups the way some dolphins or wolves do. It moves alone through the deep water, following chemical signals and pressure vibrations, navigating a world that most other creatures never even reach. But solitary does not mean it never meets others. Scientists have observed multiple Greenland sharks gathering around food sources, particularly around whale carcasses that sink to the ocean floor. These gatherings are not aggressive or territorial in any obvious way. The sharks feed alongside each other without clear signs of fighting or competition. They simply drift in, feed slowly and drift away again. No fanfare, no drama, just quiet coexistence. What is fascinating is what we do not see. There are no observed courtship rituals, no witnessed mating behavior in the wild. No sounds recorded that scientists can definitively link to communication between individuals. For an animal this large and this long lived, that silence is almost eerie. Some researchers speculate that chemical signaling plays a significant role in how these sharks find each other when it matters, particularly during reproduction. Sharks in general are known to release chemical signals into the water that carry information about their identity, their reproductive readiness, and possibly even their health. The Greenland shark almost certainly does something similar. Though the specifics remain unconfirmed, there is also the question of memory and recognition. An animal that lives for 4 or 5 centuries in the same general ocean region, covering enormous distances over its lifetime, must encounter the same individuals more than once. Whether it recognizes them, whether it has any form of social memory at all, is completely unknown. We simply do not have the tools yet to answer that question. What we do know is this: the Greenland shark spends the vast majority of its incredibly long life alone, moving through darkness. Not searching for company, not needing it, just existing in the slow, ancient rhythm that has kept its kind alive for millions of years. And that rhythm, that extraordinary pace of life, becomes even more striking when you learn how this animal reproduces. Here is a number that should stop you completely: 150 years. That is roughly how long a Greenland shark must live before it is even old enough to reproduce. Not old enough to be a grandparent. Old enough to have its first offspring at all. Think about what that means. A Greenland shark born today will not be ready to have pups until somewhere around the year 2176. Your children will be gone. Their children will be gone, and that shark will still be a juvenile, still growing, still not yet mature enough to pass on its genes. No other vertebrate animal on Earth is known to have a slower path to reproductive maturity. Not whales. Not giant tortoises, nothing else comes close. When a female does eventually reproduce, she gives birth to live pups. Scientists believe litter sizes are relatively small, somewhere between 8 and 10 pups per pregnancy. The pups are born already around 40 centimeters long. There is no nest, no nursery, no parental care of any kind after birth. The pups are released into the cold, dark water and immediately left to survive on their own. They either make it or they do not. And yet predators are almost not a concern. The Greenland shark's toxic flesh means almost nothing wants to eat it. Polar bears have occasionally been observed scavenging Greenland shark carcasses near the ice surface. Orcas may occasionally prey on juveniles, but for the most part, once this shark reaches a certain size, it has virtually no natural predators. The ocean simply does not produce many animals willing or able to take it on. So the Greenland shark's survival strategy is almost the opposite of most animals. Instead of reproducing fast and in large numbers to compensate for high losses, it reproduces slowly, rarely, and invests nothing in individual offspring. It compensates not through quantity but through sheer longevity. It simply outlives everything that might threaten it. That strategy works extraordinarily well in a stable, cold environment where conditions change slowly over centuries. The problem is that conditions are no longer changing slowly. And what humans are now doing to this animal's world is something its biology was never designed to handle. But before we get to that, there is one more layer to this story. Because the Greenland shark has not only survived in the deep for centuries, it has also survived in the human imagination. And the stories people have told about it are stranger than almost anything science has confirmed. The Greenland shark has lived alongside Arctic peoples for thousands of years, and those people noticed it. They built stories around it, they built rituals around it, and some of what they recorded is genuinely difficult to explain. The Inuit people of Greenland and Canada have long known this shark. They called it by a name that translates roughly to the one that makes you drunk or the sleepy one. That name was not random. The Inuit discovered centuries ago that eating the raw flesh of this shark causes severe intoxication. Dizziness, vomiting, disorientation, and in serious cases, death. They learned to process the meat through a specific fermentation method, burying it and drying it over months to break down the toxic compounds and make it safe to eat. The resulting dish is called hákarl, and it remains a traditional food in Iceland today. Most people who try it describe the smell as almost unbearable. But the legends go further than food. Some Inuit oral traditions describe encounters with enormous, ancient sharks that seem to appear and disappear without pattern, rising from impossible depths and vanishing again. Creatures that felt less like animals and more like something belonging to a different world entirely. On the scientific side, the mysteries are equally compelling. Researchers are still debating the upper limits of this shark's lifespan. The 2016 study that confirmed a possible age of 512 years used radiocarbon dating of the crystalline proteins in the shark's eye lens. Those proteins form at birth and never regenerate, making them a kind of permanent timestamp. But radiocarbon dating has margins of error. And some scientists argue the oldest individuals could be even older than the study suggested. The debate is ongoing. There is also the question of what this shark actually eats in the wild. Stomach content analyses have revealed extraordinary surprises. Researchers have found the remains of reindeer, horses, and even polar bears inside Greenland sharks. How exactly a shark moving at 1 kilometer per hour manages to catch a polar bear is a question nobody has fully answered. One leading theory is that it takes sleeping or drowning animals from the surface. Another is that it scavenges animals that have already died near the water's edge. The truth is, for an animal this studied and this famous, the Greenland shark still holds more questions than answers. And the biggest question of all may be whether we will protect it long enough to find out. The Greenland shark is currently listed as a vulnerable species by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. That word vulnerable sounds polite, but what it really means is that the population is declining and the trend is moving in the wrong direction. For centuries, this shark was hunted commercially. Its liver oil was used as fuel for lamps and as a lubricant for machinery. Tens of thousands were killed during the peak years of the early 20th century. The hunting has largely stopped now. But the damage from that era has not fully healed, and new threats have arrived that are in some ways even harder to fight. Deep-sea fishing is one of the biggest problems. Greenland sharks are frequently caught as bycatch, meaning they are pulled up accidentally in nets and on lines that were targeting other species. Because they live so deep and reproduce so slowly, every individual lost matters enormously. A shark that takes 150 years to reproduce cannot simply be replaced the way a fish that spawns every year can be. And then there is the ocean itself, changing faster than this animal has ever experienced. The Arctic is warming at roughly 4 times the global average rate. The cold, stable waters that the Greenland shark has depended on for millions of years are shifting. The ice is retreating. The temperature is rising. And a creature whose entire biology is calibrated to a specific narrow band of cold cannot simply adapt in a generation or two. It adapted over millions of years. It cannot undo that in decades. Here is the lesson that this animal carries for us. Quietly in the dark, we tend to think of time in human terms, a few years, a few decades, maybe a century if we are being ambitious. The Greenland shark thinks in centuries without even trying. It was born into a world that no living human ever saw. It has watched from the deep as the surface of this planet changed beyond recognition. And now, for the first time in its ancient history, the change is coming from below, into its world, into its cold. We found this animal, we named it. We marveled at it. Now the question is whether we will respect it enough to leave its world intact. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Wild World Explorer. If this story moved you even a little, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep bringing you the wild, strange, extraordinary stories that this planet still holds. The deep ocean is still mostly unknown, and there are more giants down there, waiting to be found.